And if we didn't tell you we had a guest speaker from the size of the microphone, you would have figured it out. So I wish I was this tall. Anyways, we do have a special guest speaker, Chris Russell from Destiny Rescue. Chris has become one of my favorite guys in the world, not only because he's a great guy, but because he's doing a great work. And Destiny Rescue is a ministry that we have really gotten behind as a church. You're going to see more opportunities to support this ministry in the days and weeks to come. We've got some ideas that we would like to present. We do right now currently support the ministry every month as a church, and Cindy and I support the ministry as a family. But hopefully you'll jump on board. It's one of the best ministries you can support in all the world. Chris, come on up.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back. I warned first service I kind of had a lost voice the last couple of days, so if I crack like a junior high boy sometime during the service, just give me a little grace there, okay? All I know, I love getting to different places and seeing different groups of God's people worship, and I always like to pick out who I'm going to stand by in eternity for a worship session. So, sister, I'm standing by you when we get up there. It's good to be here. It's good to be here again. It's been an amazing year. Last year when I was here, I forgot that Chicago likes to hold on to winter a little longer and left the hotel without a scraper for my car, and I did it again this morning. So we're either going to remember one next year or we're going to move it to a warmer month that I come up here. So one of the two. So, I joke about with traveling that, I have 4 kids, and I have a son that's 23 in Cincinnati, and then our 3 girls are in our area. The oldest one just moved out about a year ago, has an apartment and taking classes at college, and then still have the 15 and 9-year-old at home. And we adopted our 3 girls 6 years ago. It'll be in July. And I grew up one of 3 boys, and wow, there's a little difference with teenage boys, young boys, and girls. Am I right? I see some dads especially nodding some heads, so I know who the girl dads are in this group here. So I usually joke around about that's why I volunteer to go on the road a lot, is to get away from the drama, but I'm just kidding. The reality is this, my kids are my world in many ways, and I would do anything to make sure that they're safe, that they have a safe place to live, and that they're loved well, and that they're told about the love of our Jesus. And my guess is we got some parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles in this room. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? You've got that young woman in your life that you would do anything to protect and keep safe. And the reality is what we get to talk about together today is an issue that's a really hard one to talk about. But the good news is that God calls all of us as Christ followers, that we don't just get to step into that situation of being a protector for our kids and our relatives and those young people in our lives. We get to do that for other young women across the planet who don't have someone standing in the gap on their behalf. So that's what we get to talk about today. So I want to start off by, I know we've got some new faces, so kind of taking that 30,000-foot view of the issue, just to make sure we're all on the same page of understanding how deep and dark this is. This is what we know about human trafficking in general. Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal activity in the world. It makes more money than illegal drugs and firearms now. And just to give you some comparison, we all know, I'm from Goshen, so, the Colts are Indianapolis. You got the Bears here. I'm from Pittsburgh, so that's my team. They all stunk this past year, let's face it, But the NFL makes money hand over foot, don't they? By far our most profitable sport. The NFL made over $8 billion last year. $8 billion. How many of you would like just a little sliver of that you'd be good with, right? $8 billion. Human trafficking made over $150 billion. And of that $150 billion, we estimate about $99 billion of that is specific to sex trafficking. And it doesn't surprise you that 99% of victims of sex trafficking are females. Our organization, our primary focus is underage girls. We are the only large-scale anti-trafficking group in the world whose primary focus is underage girls, because we know right now well over 1 million kids are being sex trafficked on our planet. And the worst part of that is in Southeast Asia. Of the 1 million plus kids, we estimate about 73% is Southeast Asia. So literally, it means right now, it's just a little after 11 here. We could go over to Cambodia, Thailand, about 11, 12 hours ahead of us, and it's working hours for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of kids are being used and abused right now as we're sitting in this place surrounded by people who love God and love us and want what's best for us. That's the reality, that we can't live with blinders on this. We see the world, God sees the whole world. He sees the big picture, and as his kids, we need to strive to see the world the way God sees it, right? And that's just the reality for this. The good news is because of people like you and churches like yours, God is raising up an army to get into this battle and set kids free. Last year, I got to celebrate with you that the year before we had 2,386 rescues. Last year, we had 3,144 rescues. The youngest of those to date of our rescues has been 2 8-month-olds. One was a trafficking situation where the child was actually kidnapped first, that we were asked to be a part of. And then the other one was a girl that belonged to a brothel and had a child. Well, that child immediately becomes property of the brothel, and it's just a matter of time before something happens to that precious little one. Both of those were rescued before anything happened to them. But I share that because it shows you just how deep and dark this issue is, and it also is a reminder to us that we have to have the conversations with our kids and our grandkids, because the reality is kidnapping is not extremely common with trafficking. Social media is. And I know we got a lot of young people here that are on social media, and you got your kids and your grandkids who are on social media. The reality is, even your young kids, the littles that play video games now, there's chat features on so many of those games now. There are traffickers all over those chat rooms. Our teenagers, they're all about follows and getting likes on social media. That's a big push, but the reality is traffickers are all over social media trying to build relationships, pretending to be someone they're not, trying to build a relationship with you. Traffickers look for vulnerabilities. They're looking for kids who are lonely, who are depressed, who are suicidal, who don't have a good relationship with their parents, and they're pretending to be someone they're not and being that sympathetic ear, trying to build a trust relationship, hoping to be able to exploit that in the future. So if you haven't had that conversation with your kids and grandkids, please do. My kids, I know we're not the norm. Like, my kids don't even get a phone until they're in 9th grade, and even then it's limited on as far as social media or anything like that. And my kids know, if you don't know this person in real life, which that isn't even necessarily the standard, but if you don't know this person in real life, you have no business being connected to them on social media. Not in the world we live in anymore. It's just too dangerous. I was sharing during first service, because of what I do and because of how we are on the lookout for people who are being used and trafficked in that, my phone number gets a little bit more accessible in that. And at least 3 times a week, I get some type of text that seems innocent enough at first. It might just be a hi, or it's like, hey, is this Tony? Or, just something that's, will get an initial response. That's the hope that they'll continue with that. And, I was talking about that during first service, not realizing that during first service, I got another one. And it was this, looks like a girl that's probably 18 maybe, with a cute dog on her lap. And it says, hey, Monica, can you tell me what happened to the puppy that was sent to your clinic the day before? Here's a picture of it. Hope to hear from you soon. Seems innocent enough, Oh, sorry, wrong number, cute pup. Well, no, you don't want to respond at all to that, because that's exactly what they're waiting for. Oh, sorry, hope I didn't interrupt your day. Then the next picture may be a girl wearing, a sexy dress or something. Obviously not, in that moment, a selfie, that was taken there. And I had one 2 days ago. I texted back, I said, honey, your life is far too valuable for you to be doing this with your life. Like, God has such a better plan for your life. And I'm a resource, and here's some other resources for you. But please do something different with your life. And it breaks my heart because that one girl was in Las Vegas that I was talking to. And it's heartbreaking to know this is going on all the time. But we as God's kids, we have to be a part of this solution. Fastest growing criminal activity in the world. Think God cares about that? Heck yeah. And if he cares about that, his church better care about it. And I know your church does. And you've got great leadership, and hearts have been for this last year. Just a great kickoff for us with our first Rescue Sunday. And already with conversations after first service, I know God's got some big, big plans for this church family. So excited to be able to share that. So let's talk about how we do the rescues. I'll just take a couple minutes on this because I know some of you got to hear a little bit of this last year, but I know we have some new faces too, and it's important to understand what exactly we do. So we are one of the only organizations in the world that actually has our own undercover agents. There's a number of anti-trafficking groups in the world that gather intel, they hand it off to local authorities, hoping the local authorities will do something, but the local authorities are getting paid off to look the other way. So we raise up our own undercover agents. So at any time, we have typically between 35 and 40 full-time undercover agents. They don't necessarily look like that, which is good, helps them blend in better. Most of our agents do not have a background in any kind of military experience. We raise them up and train them ourselves, but they're able to blend into their communities and being able to seek out these kids. And you can imagine, if we're talking about the biggest money maker in the world here, if you're someone that is dealing drugs, a drug trafficker, somebody interrupts your traffic flow, you're going after them, aren't you? You're selling guns, somebody interrupts that flow, you're coming after them. It's the same thing for our guys. Their lives are on the line every single day. Our guys have been shot at, one's been stabbed. We haven't lost any to this point. And we pray for God's protection and would ask you to pray for that as well for those frontline people. But I'm going to share some stories this morning. I was in Africa for 3 weeks in June and July. Got to spend time with probably about 150 of our rescued girls in countries that used to be British colonies, so they all know English, which was great to be able to hear their stories firsthand. But I want to start, survival rescues. That's a new rescue category we've added this year because of our work in Africa. What we're finding is in Africa, we're not even dealing with many traffickers. There's such a desperation level among the young girls that they're selling themselves to be able to make enough money to eat that day. And we believe God is going to blow up Africa for us as far as being able to rescue kids, because when you have the funds and the resources and the time it takes to build cases against traffickers, if that's out of the way and you're able to very quickly step into situations with young girls, we're able to rescue a whole lot more girls. So we're trusting God to open up some doors there. So we are in Uganda, in Kenya, and Zimbabwe currently in Africa. But that's kind of the survival category we have. But historically, the border stations have been about a quarter of our rescues. Now, the good thing with border stations is we're interrupting the traffic flow. So Nepal is one of the countries we work in, and one of the neighboring countries, which is one of the worst in the world, traffickers come over. A lot of them are females. They're the recruiters that go to families, because families will trust a female coming a little bit more, and they'll promise the girl a great paying job. Or guys are playing this ruse on social media, meeting this young girl, pretending to be someone they're not, falling in love with them, and convincing them to come to their country to marry them and give them the life of their dreams. And when they cross these borders, our agents are there. And now for border stations, almost all of our agents are native females, and they have armed guards behind them, so they have permission to stop anyone who looks like a minor and ask them, where are you going? What are you doing? Where you promise this? Where you promise that? If any red flags go up, they call back to the family. 90+% of the time, the family has no idea that they're getting ready to cross the border. And if they take one step into this neighboring country, they will never be seen again by their family. The good news is we're interrupting the traffic flow, and we're rescuing these girls before the abuse starts. The best kinds of rescues, right? So that's been about a quarter. Covert rescues. So again, I mentioned 35 to 40 full-time undercover agents. I'm on our U.S. team. I go around and do a lot of speaking and raising awareness. But when I travel to places like Africa, and I've been in Cambodia and Thailand with our teams, I get to go out undercover with our guys. So when we're going out undercover, we're going into places that we believe are using and abusing younger children. And we're going into those places pretending to be a group of guys out for a fun night on the town. And I can't tell you how disgusting that feels. We're going into places and we're sitting down, and the girls gather around your table. They don't have hello, my name is tag. Nobody cares what their name is. In fact, many places they have numbers pinned on them, and that's how you order them for the night. And we intentionally reach for the youngest looking girls to sit with us and then gather information about those girls. And the hope is that we build trust in a couple nights, that we're able to pay the bar fine, because the owner has to be paid. You're losing an employee who would be selling drinks and making you money. And then you negotiate a price with the girl, and you take her wherever you want and do whatever you want all night long with her. And she shows up the next night, and it starts all over again for her. So our goal is to get them out of that. We pay the bar fine. They think we're taking them back to our hotel. We're taking them somewhere safe, where one of our native rescue agents or one of our female caseworkers is able to say, hey, this is who we really are. This is what we can do to get you out of that. And then they can choose to come into our care. So that's been about a quarter of rescues historically. And then the other half has been the RAID. So RAIDs is where we have the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, in place with the government, says what we can and can't do, allows our guys to go in with the hidden body cameras on them. So now we can go into places and we're able to not only look for underage girls, but we're able to gather video evidence that's usable in a court of law against the traffickers themselves. When we get enough evidence, we get the green light, we go in and do a joint raid, rescue the girls, arrest the traffickers, shut down the business, and then turn around and prosecute those traffickers to the fullest extent of the law. So places like the Philippines, where we do the most amount of raids, our guys have been doing that for a number of years and have a great relationship with the government there. But if you are caught trafficking 2 minors in the Philippines, that's a 30-year sentence and 30 years for each additional child. So we were part of arresting a couple that was trafficking 10 minors. They each got a 270-year sentence. And I didn't share this in the first service, but our guys work with the local law enforcement to prosecute these traffickers. Do you know what our success rate is in prosecuting these traffickers in the Philippines over the last 5-6 years? 100%. Every single one of them is serving time for trafficking kids. 270 years, not enough in my book, but
good start.
Yeah, it's a good start. So this is what I want to do now. I'm going to switch over to, I've got a 4-minute video that I want you to see. And this video is from, if we could get the lights again, and this is Tony Kerwin, who is our founder. Let me tell you just a smidge of his story before you hear his heart. So Tony, back in 2000, or in the late 90s, sorry, he went on vacation to Southeast Asia. And while they were there, they overheard a conversation with a trafficker offering a young child for a couple $100 to another tourist to do whatever they wanted. And their heart was broken by that. And their prayer was, God have mercy on these kids. But then God didn't let them off the hook. And over time, their prayer became, God have mercy on us if we don't do something to help these kids. Electrician by trade, sold their stuff, moved to Southeast Asia in 2001. And he has regularly been a part of going out on rescues ever since that time. So he's been doing this for 22 years. Regularly going out and doing these rescues. So when I talked about the undercover body camera, you're going to see some of the footage from him going out on one of those operations, but you're going to hear a little of his heart of how, even after all these years, how heartbreaking it is, the reality of how much we devalue these precious girls. So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
In one of the southern Asian nations that we work in, it is by far the biggest trafficking problem that we've seen anywhere in the world. And there is a large number of girls and women from Nepal being trafficked here to be sexually exploited.
Where are you from? Nepal. Nepalese.
In this particular brothel we went into, they've got these dirty little rooms that the guys would take the girls into. It's just like a meat factory. You just go in, yeah, I want that, do the deed, leave. She comes out, another guy, yeah, I want that. And she just goes over and over again. I heard numbers up to 40 times in one day.
Is it 14 years? 14 years. When? Yes.
There was a young girl sitting up against the wall and she clearly looked like a minor. When I sat down next to that kid, I asked the pimp, do you have any beers? Because it's not normal to just sit and talk to the girls. How much of a girl? When we started talking about how much it was to take this young kid into a room and have sex with her, it was less than the price of the beer that I was drinking.
How much you asking for? 300. Great.
That just blew me away, that this beautiful young kid, the value that they attached to her wasn't even worth a beer. And I just can't get my head around that. It's just, how can we devalue children and young women so low? Like, how did we get here? To them, she's not even worth a beer. For less than a beer, you can be abusing this kid.
That's a little tough to watch, isn't it? Did you hear that? They said some of the girls up to 40 times a day getting abused. Imagine that going on for months and months and years for some of these kids. It's all they know. It's all that they think that they have any worth for. I want to make sure you understand, we're very well known for rescuing kids. But it's not just about rescuing kids. We've got to make sure they stay free. So what we have in place is what we call a freedom plan. So some of the countries we're in, that MOU spells out what we can and can't do, and it also spells out the aftercare. So there's some countries that very much have some really strong aftercare programs for children. So some countries we rescue in, and then we consult on the aftercare, but they basically go into government care at that point. Other countries were given full range for having residential homes, discipleship programs, all that kind of stuff. So it depends on which country we're at. So every girl that comes into our care gets a freedom plan. So basically that just means the people who know each girl the best are going to come up with a plan that helps her succeed for the long haul. So you can imagine, you're looking at their relational needs, their educational needs, vocational needs, spiritual needs, psychological needs, medical needs. All of those needs are going to be factored in to that unique freedom plan for that young lady to stay free. And we are proudly a Christian organization that drives everything that we do. I mentioned in first service that if you go on our website, you don't see references to that. You're not going to see Bible verses. You're not going to see a bunch of God story talk and all that kind of stuff, but you need to understand that that's an intentional strategy on our part. Because we are an international organization, there are many countries that if you are blatantly Christian, you are immediately kicked out of that country. It had some years ago, Compassion. If anybody's ever done anything with Compassion, Compassion was completely kicked out of India. And you had thousands of children that suddenly were left without any sponsors at all. So there's a strategy to that. Because I do get people to say that, well, you can't tell from your website that you're Christians. And it's but all you got to do is talk to any of us. Because, there's six of us are pastors that are on staff, and there's about 30 of us on the U.S. team, but all very committed Christians, and our faith is what drives us to do what we do above all else when it comes to that. But our goal is to have an opportunity to share the gospel. Again, that MOU spells out what we can and can't do, so we can't do it every time. But our goal, and we've been exceeding that goal, is to at least be able to present the gospel to at least 80% of the kids who we're able to rescue. And we've been able to do that pretty consistently. So grateful for that, because they get to meet their human rescuer, but we want to introduce them to the ultimate rescuer, right? All of us in this room, if we've put our faith in Christ, we have a rescue story. We've met the ultimate rescuer. But we want these girls to meet that ultimate rescuer as well. this verse here, this is my driving verse for what we talk about. Rescue the poor and the helpless, deliver them from the grasp of evil people. Does it get any more literal than that with what we're talking about today? Deliver them from the grasp of evil people. You can visualize that, can't you? The grasp of evil people holding on to these precious kids. Before I go into some of these stories from Africa, let me reminded of the story in Numbers. You remember when Moses sent out the 12 spies to go check out the land? And we had 10 spies that came back, and what did they say? Giants. It's too big, right? Can't possibly do this, right? But then the other 2 come back who just witnessed the exact same thing, and what'd they say? Yeah, he could take it. Paraphrase, God's got this, right? How do you look at the exact same thing and end up seeing giants, unattainable, or let's go? And I feel like that's the kind of situation that we're talking about today. This human trafficking issue, sex trafficking, all these girls, like that feels like a giant, doesn't it? That feels really big. It can feel a little overwhelming when you're talking $150 billion, over 1 million kids being sex trafficked. That feels like a big giant to me. But the reality is, when you look at giants, you have 2 choices. You look at the bigness of the giant, or you look at the bigness of your God. And we serve a big, big God. And he's knocking down doors. And he's making a way. And kids are getting set free because of that. And we get invited, as broken, messed up, and imperfect as you and I are, God invites us to join him on the ultimate rescue mission. So when I was, this picture is in Uganda. When I was in Uganda, it was our CEO, me, our international marketing guy, and then our main film guy, who's actually from the England area. And we spent 3 weeks there capturing lots of stories, hearing lots of testimonies. And we went to this village to interview one of the girls that was in our program, 16 years old. So here's her backstory. When she was 14 and a half, her mother got remarried, and her stepdad didn't want any kids in the house. Said she's 14 and a half, she can take care of herself. So she was kicked out, which is not that uncommon in those countries. Got kicked out and moved to this place here. Got one of these little huts with another girl, both now 16 years old. But for a year and a half, this was their reality. They woke up every day, and them and other young ladies had to make the walk down to a well-known street corner and hope that one of the young guys driving by, or not young necessarily, young, old, whatever, one of the creeps driving by, let's just use that. Can we use that phrase? Yeah. I think we're all in agreement there. One of the creeps that drives by would choose to take them and abuse them so they could get $1.50 or $2 to be able to get a meal that day. Day after day after day after day. That was her reality. So you and I, gosh, we have things we look forward to. I've been looking forward to coming here for weeks, looking forward to Easter, the big celebration next week. Leave tomorrow morning. My family and I on the girls' spring break, we're going down to Nashville. Like, we're always looking ahead. We're always anticipating, excited about something. Not when you're in that situation. When you're in that situation, you wake up and you ask one question. What do I have to do to survive today? And the next day you ask the same question again, and you do what's necessary to survive. That's a whole different world. But what's exciting for her is as soon as we started her in our food program, as soon as she simply had enough food to eat every day, she never had to make that walk again. Just by providing enough food for her. That made all the difference for her. And then we got her in our job training program. And now her and one of the other girls is going to school to be able to work at salons. And she's super excited about that. And she thinks she's got a great future ahead of us. And you know what she's got now that she didn't have before? Hope. Hope. And when we got done interviewing her, the last thing she said was thank you, thank you, thank you. I've run out of words. That's what we get to do together. That's the difference we get to make. When we were in Zimbabwe, one of the things that I'm always interested in when we go is to see, because we partner with local ministries. Because we don't want to start from the ground up, because it can take years just to develop the most basic trusted relationships in a community. We got to rescue kids. So we find like-minded organizations that are already doing something and working with kids, and then we grow that program in partnership. So like when we were in Zimbabwe, it's a building that holds about 70 kids that needed food, that didn't have a place to stay. And once they hit 70, that was capacity. So we come in, and what the partnership looks like is we add 3 branches to this. We add these people, and then we add the training to it. So we add field agents. They're the ones who go out and interview these girls that are having to sell themselves. And you know who their circle of informants is? Usually you hear informants, and you're thinking, ooh, something out of a movie or something. It's church members, local business leaders that come to the team and say, hey, we've discovered that this young girl is having to sell herself to be able to support her family now. And our agents are able to very quickly go out, meet that girl, interview her, verify the story, and bring her into our program. We have counselors. You imagine the trauma that these girls have gone through. So we do the training for the counselors for that aftercare component. And then we have what's called TOJ, training on the job. So we add agents who go out, and they're looking for local business leaders. So in Africa, the girls, hair salons, sewing, and catering. Those are the 3 big things that the girls want to do. So we look for local business leaders that are in those areas, and then we develop a partnership with them. So let's say you own a couple salons, okay? So you agree to take 5 of my girls at your salons for 6 months. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay their full salary for 2 months, 2/3 for 2 months, and 1/3 for 2 months. So that's a win for the business. The win for our girls, of course, is they're getting fully trained and to be able to work in one of these places. When they're done the 6 months, if you have an opening, well, you can hire the girl. You know what you got. If not, they're ready to go get a job somewhere else. One of the ladies we went to, she owned 3 salons, and she called one of the girls over. And I just enjoyed watching instead of watching the lady talk about her, I just enjoyed watching the expression on the girl's face. Because the lady started just doting on her about how she showed up every day and how she worked hard. And every time she said another positive thing, that smile just got bigger and bigger to the point where you shove a banana in there and it wouldn't have gotten any bigger. Like, she just had this huge, and again, this is a girl that 3 months earlier only knew getting used and abused every day. And she said, and after just 3 months, this girl has already earned a chair in my salon. And she was so excited, so happy about her future. That's what we get to do together. When we were in Kenya, something that the church actually came up with themselves, they partnered with 6 other churches, and they got these churches, a bunch of the families got licensed as foster families. So now when the girls get rescued, they get to be placed immediately with a healthy Christian family. How awesome is that, right? And we went to church that Sunday, and I confess I wasn't focusing on the pastor that much, because we were sitting about halfway back, and about 25 of the rescued girls were in the front rows, and they just worshiped their faces off. And it was a beautiful thing to see. And afterwards, we got to spend time. We captured 3 of the girls' stories, got to spend time with the rescued girls. And then we got into a room with about 20 of the foster parents. And we had them go around one by one, stand up, introduce themselves, tell us about the kids they had, some of the challenges, some of the joys. And then we asked them their why. Why are you doing this? Because the reality is we got to go visit 4 or 5 of those families. And none of them were rich. Most of them were barely getting by themselves. And yet they brought in another girl into their family to make a difference. And 3 of those people basically said the exact same thing when they shared their whys. They simply said, if you can, why wouldn't you? If you can, why wouldn't you? And it was a gut punch to me, because I think for us in the American church, it's the same challenge. If you can, why wouldn't you? If your church can rescue kids, why wouldn't you? If your life group, if your club, if your school, if you're college age or younger, rescueop120.com. You need to check it out. We've got thousands of teenagers across our country right now that are doing stuff to set their peers free. And it's amazing. We have a whole program for anywhere from elementary up through college age. They can be a part of that. And it's an amazing thing to watch because our average rescue is 15-year-old girls. And when you see 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids here doing something to rescue their peer, that's a beautiful thing to see. To be a part of that. Another time that we were in Uganda, the church that we partner with there works in the largest slum in the country. And we went out to that slum, and we were walking through the slum, and people were looking in your direction, but they were just looking through you. It was just hollow faces. And our field agent said, most of these people are just simply waiting to die. And we went to capture 3 girls' stories. And while we were recording those 3 girls' stories, over 60 other girls lined up, hoping that they would be able to get help too. That was a heavy morning to see that. One of the girls, we captured her story, and her story was that 2 different guys she would go visit twice a week. Sometimes they paid her, sometimes they didn't. She had to hope that this time she was going to get paid so she could eat. So it was a heavy morning. Then we took a 1-hour van ride to one of our residential homes where we had 45 girls. Now we're over 90, where the girls live, where they have training for the classes in those 3 different areas we talked about. And after that heavy morning, we get to the site, and I slide the van door open. The first thing I heard was joyful laughter. Joyful laughter. And for the next 4 hours, we spent time with these 45 rescued girls, hearing their stories, seeing them in action in their classes. And they were so proud to have us there, just showing off their skills, making food. One of the girls came up to me with her teacher and measured me, and then went, and 4 hours later, I had a shirt, collared shirt, pocket, button down, and beautiful African colors. I was rocking it. And I have a picture on my phone. If you want to see it afterwards, let me know. It's got her, because her eyes and her face, smile is priceless, but we don't put that up on public, especially when things are being streamed for protection of the kids. But if you want to see that, I've got that on my phone. And I was rocking it. That was some beautiful African vibe going on there. And the smile on her face of a girl that 3 months earlier had no hope, only knew abuse. And it's because of people like you and churches like yours this is happening. Because I want to make sure you understand this. Rescue stories, they don't start when our agents get those girls out of that situation. Rescue stories start on a day like today, where God stirs up the heart of his people to use their voice, to use their resources, to use their influence. That's what starts a rescue story. You kick it off here, we get to see the conclusion of that rescue story on that in there. But if we don't do our part here, they don't get to do their part over there. So it's really vital. All of us do our part. All of us do our links in the chain. And when we all do that together, man, God honors that and rescues a lot of kids. So let's talk. Obviously, we raise funds. I mean, that's a big part of what we do. It's not the life-giving part for me, but I want to touch base on that because this is the tangibleness we know, because we've been doing this for 22 years. We know on average the cost to do the undercover work, to get our agents in, their expenses, to get the girl to a safe place to start her freedom path is about $1,500. So we have that very tangible reality of knowing $1,500 forever changes a kid's life. So here's my challenge for you guys. We live in the richest country in the history of the world. What are any of us in our lifetimes going to do with $1,500 more significant than rescuing a child out of that kind of hellish nightmare? I mean, some of you are in a position to do that now. A lot of you aren't. But that can be a goal that you work towards. Maybe it's over a year's time that you build that up and rescue a child. And then our other main thing is the rescue partner. I've got some packets at the table there if you want to grab one of those. We intentionally leave our rescue partner at any amount. You know, if you do child sponsorship, usually it's like $35, $40 a month. It's pretty standard. We intentionally don't set any kind of amount on that because we believe God has called all of us to be a part of rescue. And that can look different for different people. I've got people who literally do $5 a month. I have people who do $1,500 a month as rescue partners. And God takes all of those, us doing our something, and has set thousands and thousands of kids free. So what is your part? And I'm not pushing on that. This is a God thing. If God's stirring in you, man, be obedient to that. But I believe he is stirring in this church family. I think there's a lot of people who want to do something about that, which that takes me to the part that lights my fire. So my favorite thing that I get to do is help people figure out their best yes. God has never wasted a day of your life. Every experience you've been through, the people that you've encountered, the place where you live and work, your business, your expertise, your hobbies, your clubs that you're in, the school that you attend, God wants to use all of that for kingdom purpose. And he can. And what's fun for me is helping you figure that out. If you own a business or you work somewhere, what's that look like to talk to leadership about partnering with Destiny Rescue to rescue a couple kids this next year? I talk with businesses every year. I have ones that partner with us, and whether it's close and I'm in person or I do it by video, I video in with their team, and I share the impact of their giving, and I share update stories. And you know how much that fires up employees to know their employer is not just giving them paycheck to paycheck, but their employer, their company that they work for, rescues kids. People are proud to work for companies that do that. So get into a conversation. Maybe you're in a club, work with lots of like Rotaries, Kiwanis groups, just different men's clubs, women's clubs. Work with lots of those to raise awareness, raise funds to rescue kids. We have a freedom walk in Goshen that the Goshen Rotary does, and they get businesses to sponsor it, and then they walk. And in 2 years' time, people come pay $20 to walk or run around the high school track for the day. And in 2 years, they raised $208,000 to rescue and restore kids. We had a group from here last year that took that idea. I came up. I got to meet them at the park. We had a group of us that just walked for a couple hours, and we talked and shared stories, and we learned from each other. Their goal was to rescue a kid, and I rescued 7 kids. Walking. Pretty much all of us can do that, right? I've got a guy in Philadelphia I just talked to. So he had a goal to run a full marathon in all 50 states in his lifetime. In January, he just ran in Hawaii and completed that goal. Took him 15 years. And now he says, I want to do something more significant. I want to run for Destiny Rescue. So at the end of July, he's going to start from Erie, Pennsylvania. He still has to work, so he's going to be getting up early in the morning. And for 30 days, he's going to be running 15 to 20 miles every morning to go from Erie to Philadelphia. And he's already got news crews that want to cover the story and learn more about it. He's got churches and people that are going to put him up for those nights along that route. And he's going to use what he loves to do. He's been running for years. But now he realizes, man, I can run for the kingdom. That's pretty cool. May 1st, got a mother-daughter banquet that I'm going to. That I'm going to get a chance to speak at. Everything raised that night is going to go towards rescuing kids. In 3 weeks, my wife and I are going to prom. Got a youth group in Portage, Michigan. I've done 3 rescue Sundays there. They did a big auction thing in November. The kids got fired up, and they said, we want to do something. So they put together an adult prom. They're going to have 50 couples, and they've planned all the activities for the night. So I might need to have my phone out to record a lot that night. Who knows where that's going to go, right? But how awesome is that? You got a bunch of teenagers putting together an adult prom to rescue kids. Last year I had a Montessori school. 20 14-year-olds did their spring play. It was a comedy about families stuck together during COVID. Pretty appropriate. Their goal was to rescue one of their peers. They didn't have any set ticket charge. They didn't have any set price on the concessions. It was just give what you want after they shared their hearts. They raised enough to rescue 3 kids that night, just doing their spring play at school. All of us are capable of rescuing. So what is it in your life as you are thinking about this? Is it the business you're connected with? Is it a club? Is it your school? Is it your family? Is it your church? Is it your small group? Something else that you can do to rescue kids. I had a lady I talked to about a month and a half ago from Iowa send in a rescue a child, and I always love to call when I get a rescue a child and hear the stories of, like, especially when it's first time, like, how'd you hear about us? Like, and what stirred in your heart to do this? And found out that her father had been killed in a car accident just a few months before that, and they were going through settling all the financial stuff. And while they were doing that, they found out that he had done the 2 years before, had rescued a child each of those 2 years, and the rest of the family didn't even know about it. So she didn't even know about Destiny Rescue. They just wanted to do it in honor of him. So we spent 45 minutes just talking about Destiny Rescue, answering questions. And by the time we got done, she's like, I've got to do more. What do we do? So I kind of took her through what we just talked about. Think through these areas in your life. And she said, you know what? I own a dance studio. And by the time we were done, she already had the plan. A couple weeks later, she was putting together a Friday night. She was going to offer 3 classes for different age groups and abilities. And everything that came in was going to rescue kids. They rescued 2 kids doing what they already love to do. All of us can be a part of rescue. God has never wasted a day or a moment or an experience in your life, good or bad. And he can add kingdom purpose to any of it. I was thinking about one of my readings here recently that God just kind of put a statement on my heart that's just, I've been processing. You know, God puts something on you, and sometimes, you know, maybe you're not as thick-skulled as I am. Maybe it gets through quickly. But for people like me, sometimes it takes a little while to really think on it. Anybody else? Am I the only one? That's embarrassing. Okay. I'm the only thick-skulled person in the room. That's amazing. Statistically, you know how unlikely that is? Maybe our next series is on lying in church, Pastor. But if you look at the Old Testament book of Haggai, I'm sure a lot of you read it this past week. Haggai. Short one. You can read it in a very short period of time. What was happening was the people were supposed to be rebuilding the temple. Remember how the temple was destroyed in the Old Testament? And they were supposed to be rebuilding it. And they weren't. Instead, they were focused on building up their own fancy homes. And God called them on it. So you're focused on your own agenda, and you've forgotten about mine. Are we guilty of that? Hopefully I'm not the only one guilty of that as well. It's easy to get caught up. We just get caught up in the agenda that the world has on a day-to-day basis, don't we? We go through the motions. Priorities for us are the same as the priorities for the rest of the world. And we lose sight of looking at our calendars and looking at our budget and seeing, how much is my relationship with God reflected in these 2 areas? When I look at my calendar, my time, how am I seeing how God's transformation in my life is showing up in my calendar? And when we look at our budgets, how much are we seeing God's transformation work in our lives showing up in our generosity? And the phrase that he put on my mind, which is in that book, was he said to the people, he said, give careful thought to your ways. Give careful thought to your ways. You know what that means? We've got to be intentional. If we're not intentional to give careful thought on a regular basis to our ways, we're just going to get sucked into the ways of the world, right? We're just going to go with the flow. We're not going to stand out. People aren't going to be drawn to the church because it doesn't look any different than the rest of the world, so why bother? But if we give careful thought to our ways, and it shows up in our calendar, and it shows up in our budget, people are going to take notice of that. Something different about these people. What is it? There's something different that drives your life, and I need to know what that is. And if we give careful thought to our ways, we draw people into the kingdom, and they get to meet their ultimate rescuer, ultimately. I'm so grateful for the chance to be here again, to be able to share some stories. Hit me up for the picture afterwards, but use your voice. I've got a table set up down here. If something is stirring you, please grab one of my business cards, because I want to stay in touch. I want to help you figure out what your best yes is. Good chance you're not going to know right now. All right? God's just starting the stirring process. Although based on what you said earlier, you guys are pretty quick learners, so maybe you do know already by now. So, but for me, I know sometimes I just want to pray about it. I want to talk to some people about it, throw out some ideas, see what lands. But man, lean into it. What do you already love to do? Who are some other people that love to do the same thing? How do you add a kingdom purpose? Use your influence. Use your resources. Let's set some more kids free. Thanks.
Let's all stand. Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing Chris out today. As you have said, Lord Jesus, we need to lift up our eyes and look. We get kind of nearsighted and focus often on our immediate lives and what affects us directly. And we don't realize sometimes there's a lot of hurting people out there. And you've made us to be in a position where we can really help these children. So we ask you to bless the ministry of Destiny Rescue, bless Chris and his family personally, and show us as a church how we can better, and as individual families, how we can better serve the kingdom by getting involved in this ministry. We thank you, Lord. We ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.